You're all very welcome to this Club Leadership Series webinar this evening. My name is Niall Mulrine, and I'm a National Development Officer with the LGFA, and I'm delighted to have Claire Conlon alongside me this evening. Claire, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Claire Connon. I'm the National Development Support Officer with the LGFA, so I'm the one who annoys you all with the registration emails as you approach the courses. So yeah, delighted to be here with Niall this evening.
Yeah, thanks very much, Claire. I suppose just before we begin, there's a few wee housekeeping bits and pieces. We hope this webinar lasts around an hour and 15 minutes in total. The presentation will probably last around 55 minutes an hour, and then we'll give a wee bit of time for any questions at the end. You're all on mute just when you've entered the chat there, just to make sure there's no interruptions during the presentation. But if you do want to engage, if you do want to take part, there is a chat function in the wee toolbar that you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and there's also a Q&A function. So if you'd like to write in there, if you have any questions or if you have any comments, there'll be times where we will be asking you maybe to give us a bit of feedback or to interact with us, so please make use of that as well. We might ask you, there's a wee function where you can put your hand up, I think, if you have something to add, but Claire will be keeping an eye on the chat. So if you do write something in there, it will be seen as well. And just if you can't hear, or if the audio is not working, would advise you just leave the webinar and join back in, and hopefully that'll solve that problem. But I suppose just to begin with, what we're looking at tonight is managing a committee. And I suppose myself and Claire were talking there just before everyone came on, and we were sort of saying it's probably something that everyone thinks, you know, they do and they do well, but and it's not, I suppose the night's not to lecture you or say you should be doing this and you shouldn't be doing that. It's really just to give you a few tips on what works well and what should be working well, and maybe what should be best practice in terms of your committee. So we'll probably split into two sections. We'll look at, I suppose, what makes up a committee and how to get your committee working well. And then we'll spend a bit of time tonight looking at delegation as well, and how do you get other people, I suppose, to take an equal bite of the work as well. But I suppose straight away, section one, identifying an individual committee member's strengths and how to manage a committee. And I suppose straight away, what is a committee? And we're down here, it's a group of men that can individually do nothing, but as a group decide that nothing can be done. It's the unfit trying to lead the unwilling to do the unnecessary. And it's a group that keeps minutes and loses hours. So there's three quotes that come up when people are asked what exactly is a committee, but I'm sure we know that committees much more than that. So, you know, committees are part of everyday life. You're a member of your family. That's a committee. You're all working together. You could have a staff committee in work, in your school, in your community. You might have a community centre committee, or maybe a town committee, or a tidy towns committee, something like that there. And in your club, obviously you're on a committee, and like you don't think of it, but you're part of these committees. So I suppose it's appropriate to understand how to function effectively as a committee member. And I suppose just to get started, and just so you aren't listening to my voice the whole time, maybe if you could write into the chat some examples of different committees that you're a part of in your local area. It doesn't have to be the football club. So what kind of areas are you involved in, or what committees are you involved in? And Claire, maybe you keep a wee eye on that for me.
Few answers coming in there for charity, community hub, market committee.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Like I think you know, the club's the obvious one, and the football club probably is where we see it most. Most obviously that you are part of a committee, because you go to, I suppose, committee meetings and the subcommittees and different things that got there. But it's important to remember just that, you know, you're doing things in a committee setting, and you're doing things as part of a committee, and a whole other host of things you do in your life. And it's about, I suppose, the night's not just about how do you operate your LGFA committee. It might help you in those other respects too. So you can see club fundraisers, parents associations, all that kind of stuff is part of committees. And I suppose it's having a wee think that, does your club committee run and operate the same way as the other committees in your life, or the other committees that you're part of? And I suppose, like, a committee has a number of functions, or there's a number of reasons why you should have a committee. And like, first and foremost, it's to carry out the work of the club. Because like, I'm sure if it was left to one or two people, the work would still be done, but is it going to be done to the same standard? Probably not. So it's important to have a committee, so you have a number of hands to be able to do the work. Second one, and I'd say more important, and it's one of the big reasons to have a committee in your club, is to represent, involve, and to serve members. I suppose we're very, very fortunate the way the LGFA is structured, in that you have a direct link to your club executive through the committee. You have regular meetings where I suppose grievances and issues can be resolved and solved. And you also have another link to your county committee, to your provincial committee, and to national committees there as well through your committee. So it's a great vehicle to represent and involve and serve your members. And I suppose that's the big thing people forget about a committee as well, is that once you're on the committee, that's when the hard work starts. You haven't made it yet. So you're there to serve, I suppose, the club, and you're there to work for the benefit of the club as well once you become part of a committee. Another reason to have a committee then is just to provide training ground for future leaders of the club. So I know when we talk about committees and subcommittees and things like that there, sometimes you can think it's a bit pie in the sky, and you think, yeah, that's great in an ideal world. But having subcommittees, have assistants, it's not something maybe you mightn't do as a club, but it's a really, really beneficial and really useful way of training people up and giving people a taste of what it might be like to take on one of the bigger roles in the club. So it can be a really useful tool to do that as well. And I suppose to have an effective committee, and it's what we're going to look at in a wee second, it needs to have these things: a clear and written purpose. So I think we all know why we have a committee in the LGFA. It's for the three reasons I outlined before. So it's to carry out the work of the club, it's to represent, involve, and serve the members of the club, and it's, I suppose, to give people a chance to take on roles within the club. You need an effective committee chair, and we'll look at that in a wee second, what makes up an effective committee chair. Thoughtfully appointed members, so not just whoever puts up their hand, or not just whoever's left, or whoever attends the AGM. So thoughtfully appointed members, so people that fit the right roles, and we might talk about that just a wee bit later as well. And then well-run meetings, because I suppose when we get on to committees, I think the number one factor in someone not coming onto a committee is whether or not your meetings last for 3 hours, which people don't like. So there are four things I would say are key to having an effective committee: a clear written purpose, an effective committee chair, thoughtfully appointed members, and well-run meetings. We might just go to the chat there again. Those are the four I have come up with. But again, can you think of any other ways a committee can be effective, or any other, I suppose, any other characteristics of an effective committee? So maybe you can give us, if you'd like to share, from your own club, or from some other club you've seen, what works well, or what makes a good committee.
Take their roles seriously, to be collaborative.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think just taking the role seriously, the first one, Claire, there, like, you want people, when they come on and take on a role in committee, I suppose sometimes you can refer to them as ghost committee members. They're the ones that put their hand up at the AGM and are never seen again. You don't want people like that, I suppose, to be taking on a role in your club. You want someone who's actually going to commit to whatever role they're taking on. Definitely. Collaboration as well. Like I said at the start, having 2 or 3 people that might want to do everything, and might want to run the club, and might be well fit to run the club. It's not good for the wider club. You need to have a lot of people involved. You need to have people like feeling like they're involved as well. And I see the last one there as well.
Yeah, to communicate. Yeah.
Communicate with all members. Yeah. So it's back to, why to have a committee. You're representing all your members, so your members should know what's going on, and especially what's going on in terms of the committee, what decisions are being taken by the club, that kind of stuff. I see, is there another one in there, Claire?
Yeah, there's one there from Frank, and he just mentioned that giving an opportunity for all members of the committee to have a say, have lots of work done off season. Often committee members tend to be coaches, etc. Yeah,
and Frank's been, I recognize Frank's name from a number of our webinars here, and he's spot on, as he usually is in most of these. You want, the reason we have a committee, and the reason we have the structures we have, is to give everyone a say, and give all members a say. And as I said, it's but representing them and letting people air their views, because at the end of the day, clubs are all part of the community, and you want your club to be a massive part of the community and central to the community. So you want people to feel like they're able to have input in that as well, definitely. And I take that on board as well about having lots of work done in the off season. Yeah, so like I suppose a lot of people maybe think that once the playing season's over and once you have your AGM, that the work's done. But I would find that it's a great time to start, you know, and not take 2 months, or maybe not finish your AGM in November or December and then not meet again until January. There can be a lot of work done in that off season as well. And then the last one I see there, to listen, is a great one as well. So yeah, that's all part of representing your members, making sure you're listening to them. I suppose back to the purpose of a committee again, you know, your committee has to have a scope. So again, a committee in the LGFA, your scope is to maintain and make sure the operations of your club run well, and make sure the club runs well. And sometimes, in some cases, the committee is there to make sure the club still operates and still keeps going, and I suppose pass on the tradition to the next generation as well. Your committee is the authority in the club. So again, it's about making decisions. It's about, and I suppose like that's when once a decision is made at committee level, it has authority in the club, and that's the decision that's taken. It can have specific tasks and responsibilities. So when we think of, I think Shirley said it earlier, you know, you could have a fundraising subcommittee on your committee, and their specific task is to raise funds for your club. You might have a youth subcommittee on your committee, and their job is to, I suppose, improve and develop the youth structures in your club. You might have a development committee. You might have, you know, any other specific subcommittees that are leading into your general committee. And then your general committee, on that committee you have a number of people who have specific responsibilities on that as well, to report to a board or executive committee. And when we think of that there, that's like our subcommittees, as I say, you know, they're reporting back to your club executive, to your chair, secretary, treasurer, you know, your PRO, that kind of thing, your top table, as people like to talk about. But also, you know, as a club, you're attending maybe county board meetings, and you're maybe reporting, or maybe you're engaging with discussion up the chain as well. Purpose of committee then, so I suppose members there, and that's really about officers, you know, so you're going to have officers in the committee, and it's about how they're chosen, what terms they have, all that kind of stuff as well. So that's all decided on a committee as well. So we know the number of different roles that are available in the LGFA. You get your chairperson, secretary, treasurer, PRO, development officer. You might have a fundraising, a chief fundraiser. You might have a coaching officer. You know, you could have a development officer, that kind of stuff. And how are they chosen? We know how they're chosen in the LGFA. A lot of them are chosen by, I suppose, election at AGMs, and then there's a number of them that are chosen, and they're specifically sought out for their skills as well. And then finally, a committee, and it's a really, really important one, within I suppose all our clubs, is to budget and to make sure that our resources are being well used. And that's, I suppose, a big job of the treasurer within the committee, but it's up to the committee as well to decide, you know, how funds are chosen, or how funds are spent, and how, not even funds, but how other resources, how our time spent, what are we going to concentrate on, that kind of thing as well. Again, back to the chat, we might just if anyone has anything to add there, in terms of what other purposes your committee can have, or if your committee and your club has a different purpose, or if they have an additional purpose, don't be afraid to write it in there now.
So one coming in there just for a good communication across the board was just one that came in, but I think that might be relating to the earlier.
Yeah, I suppose it's a purpose of the committee as well, you know, to have good communication, and that's not just coming up to the committee from members, but it's also back down to your members as well, and that there's good, I suppose, two-way communication going on there within the club, and also that that your committees, if anything's coming in from your county executive or your provincial board, that kind of stuff, or other clubs, that it's communicated as well. Yeah, definitely.
Katrina came in there mentioning this, to develop the club, which is good, obviously, not to just be staying where you are, but try and progress and move the club forward.
Yeah, 100%. Like, yeah, and really, I suppose a lot of people on here tonight, probably you're here because of that, to develop your club. So it's good to see that as well. But that can be a key purpose of the committee as well. And I suppose the specific people on the committee that are going to be really, really focused on that part as well.
Yeah, and Jean has mentioned goal setting, and then we have Franken again, dealing with things as soon as possible. Now instead of leaving things on the long finger.
Yeah, and I think that's a good one from Frank as well, because again, the committee gives your club structure to be able to deal with issues at hand. So again, I know we have, you have regular committee meetings, whether at the moment they're via Zoom or via Teams and that kind of thing. But you know what you're talking about every month. You know the specific things you have to deal with, and if you didn't have the committee, would they be done? So that's a great point as well. That's the purpose of the committee. We might just stay again, guys, if you're still on the chat there. So we're going to look at, the next thing we're going to look at is your chairperson and the person who chairs your committee. And maybe if you'd like to write down and write into the chat what you think a good chairperson looks like, or what skills and attributes should a good chairperson have. So again, we'll give you 30 seconds there, don't be shy, and you can write in what you think there.
So the first one there for the chairperson coming in is that they should be approachable, should have good communication skills, a good listener, they should be able to delegate, they need to be a good mediator and a good communicator, they need to be committed, they need to be positive, they must be able to listen and keep calm, be impartial, respect to all others, manage the meeting well with time, etc. They must be organized. So plenty of traits to a chairperson.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose like it's probably why we take time, and it's probably the one, along with secretary and treasurer, that we take time making sure we do get the right person, because it can be really I suppose intricate to the success of your club. I see a good one from Teresa.
Yeah, it's made me laugh.
Yeah, enjoyed that one. No, definitely. I suppose in terms of the chairperson of your committee, like some of the things you'd want them to be is, have knowledge and relevant experience. So have knowledge of the association, have knowledge of the club, and I suppose the relevant experience in terms of, have they been involved in the club for a while? Have they done a number of different jobs? You'd really want that from your chairperson, because you want them to lead. And I suppose the next thing there is having proven leadership and people skills. That's more important to me in terms of a chairperson than having technical skills. They don't have to be, the best footballer that ever played for your club, but that they have the leadership and probably more importantly, the people skills to be able to do the job. Because I suppose sometimes the chairperson is a referee as well between different maybe factions in the club. So it's really important that they have those people skills to be able to deal with that as well. And I suppose the last one down there as well, that they work well with others, because again, your chairperson is the person that's going to have to be leading your club. So they need to bring people with them. I suppose some other skills of the chairperson is someone who organizes effectively, because again, they're someone who, suppose, is going to set the agenda and set the direction of the club. So they need to be able to organize that and organize people around them as well. Motivating others is a really good one as well for a chairperson to have, because again, you're a leader there. You're trying to infuse other people and enthuse them in terms of wanting to help out in the club. So you need to be motivating. Someone who keeps people on task. So again, when you think of meetings and when you think of, and it's something I suppose we do have a webinar on meetings, but just on the fact of the chairperson, like we all know when meetings can, I suppose, get away on a tangent, and we can talk about something and maybe it's half an hour later and we haven't actually figured out what we were talking about. We've moved on to an entirely other situation or conversation. So the chairperson's there to keep people on task. And good communication skills as well is vital for a chairperson, because again, if you have a vision for a club, if you're trying to lead them in a certain direction, you need to be able to communicate that as well. We've something in the chat there, do we, Claire?
Yeah, Kieran just come in there and he's just like, they should be able to promote the club in the area as well.
Yeah, so I think so. Like again, your chairperson is it's one of your key people in the club, and I suppose they're the face of the club in many ways, because I'm sure we all know who the chairperson is in our local club, and you want them to be able to promote the club and promote the club in a really positive way as well. Definitely. I suppose some responsibilities of the chairperson in terms of your committee is maybe to prepare and present committee reports, and we can think of like at the AGM. Your chairperson there is reading out the chairperson's report for the year. They have also they're preparing agendas, as you can see there as well, for every committee meeting, and it's really important that your chairperson knows and sets the agenda, and I suppose sets the direction, again, a discussion within the club. Part of their job as well to groom a successor, definitely. I suppose We all know maybe instances where we have chairpersons or secretaries or any of the officers in our club, and they're maybe there for 5 or 6 years, and maybe themselves they're feeling like they can't really step down because they don't know who's going to take over for them. Well, part of their job should be identifying and getting someone ready to take over them, because you don't want someone staying, I suppose, that long in a role. It might work in some clubs and it might work really well, but I suppose what you can have happen in some of the cases is someone that gets a bit stale and gets a bit scundered with the role, I suppose the right way to say it. So you don't want that either. So you want someone who's able to groom a successor, and being able to hand over at the right time as well is really important for a chairperson. Someone that's going to call meetings. Again, your chairperson's calling your meeting, so whether that's your monthly meeting, whether it's your AGM, whether it's just an ad hoc thing, or if there's something to be discussed, if there's something to be sorted out, the chairperson's the one to do that. Big important one from a chairperson as well is they allow all members to contribute. So again, when they're chairing meetings, when they're chairing committees, it's important that they don't let people, I suppose, take over, and that they know that if maybe someone has a valid point, but maybe they're a bit shy and they're not willing to step forward, that they're bringing them into the conversation, they're bringing them into the meeting as well. And then big role of the committee, and it's one where we fall down some of the time as well with the chairperson, is assigning responsibilities and following up. Because again, back to the meetings, and it's something we will be dealing with in a future webinar, but like we want our meetings to be action orientated, and that's really the role of the chairperson, to assign, if something's been discussed and something's been agreed, it's really then the chairperson role to assign somebody to that task and then follow up to make sure they've done it as well. I suppose other things in terms of the chairperson then is recruiting members. Key to that, as we talked about, someone who's going to promote the club to the wider area. So they're also going to, I suppose, try and attract new members and try and attract new people to come involved as volunteers as well. They might be orientating new members, so they might give new members a taste of what it's like to be in the club. They might give them a bit of a rundown on what it's like to be involved in the club, if you don't have someone who's already responsible for that. Again, to report to a board or to an executive committee. So again, your chairperson might report back in meetings. It might be that they've been at a county board meeting and they're reporting back what they said. It might be the other way around. Again, important one is to be familiar with the goals of your club and the association and its bylaws. So getting, they don't have to know it inside out, but having a good understanding of, what's acceptable, what's not in the official guide. Communicating with members. I think we had that previously as well in the chat, the really important one as well, being able to communicate effectively, and praising member contributions. And it's something we forget about maybe in the association and maybe in Irish society as a whole, is praising people that do well and praising people that are a really positive addition to the club. So the chairperson should be leading in that one as well. Some things the chairperson on your committee shouldn't be doing then is talking the most at meetings. I would say definitely not, because really you're there to chair the meeting. You're not there, I suppose, to dictate the meeting, and it's really about giving everyone an opportunity to speak. So if you find that yourself as a chairperson, or if you're not the chairperson of your club, but you find the chairperson is talking the most at meetings, well, I would say maybe there's a conversation to be had there, just about maybe letting other people in and letting other people contribute. Claire, did you have something to add there? Just
no, like it's just vital in terms of having some, I suppose, fairness in the committee, that you can't have, if you have a chairperson who's running the show and not taking an opinion and not having open discussion, it's, I suppose, you're heading down the lines of dictatorship rather than working as a team and making decisions as a team.
Yeah, and it's really, you've hit the nail on the head there. Like, you want to be the person leading the club. You don't want to be the person dictating to other members, and you want to make other members feel like they have an input as well. So if you go to a meeting and one person's talking all the time, and it really doesn't matter if it's the chairperson. If one person is talking all the time and not giving other people an opportunity to input, people aren't going to be involved in that, really. Or they're going to maybe not be as enthusiastic with it.
And I was the one you mentioned a moment ago about the action items. I've been member of committees where you have a meeting, it's great discussion, there's action items, and then the minutes aren't sent out to everybody until the week before the next meeting, and then everyone has a couple of days to try to do all the actions. So I would definitely try, and if you can get a good process going where the minutes are circulated as soon as possible within a meeting, to give people time to actually accomplish the action items between the meetings. So that, how many of us have gone to a meeting where at the next meeting the action is put on the actions again, to be done before the next one, so things just start to drag out. So that was just another thing.
No, it's a great point again, Claire. And I suppose, like, from my own point of view, like, I know meetings I've been at and where minutes haven't been read back, and or they haven't been sent out at all, and they've just been read out maybe at the start of a meeting, and I maybe it's my own attention span, but I'd be sitting going, whenever they finish reading the minutes, I forget what the first ones were, you know, by the time they've been read. So it's really important to circulate. Yeah, and let people know what's going on is really vital. And I suppose, like, we could spend a whole hour here talking about meetings, and I suppose that's why we are doing a meeting webinar later in the year and at the start of March, just because there's so much I suppose you can do right there as well. But really good one as well is making sure that minutes, and I suppose getting a chairperson to do that as well, making sure that minutes are circulated and followed up with. Some other things that a chairperson shouldn't do is make all the decisions. It should be the committee making decisions, and that's, like, again, that's, I suppose, something that should be enshrined in your club, that it's not one person making all the decisions. If there is, if there's maybe a tied vote, or there can't be or there needs to be a deciding factor there, then maybe a chairperson could come in there, but they shouldn't be, I suppose, again, dictating what direction the club's going all the time. Allowing one or more people to dominate the meeting, again, same as the chairperson making all the decisions or talking at the meeting. They shouldn't let other people dictate that, and dominate that as well. Cutting people out of discussions as well shouldn't really happen. Everyone should feel they should be able to input into discussions in your committee. You shouldn't allow meetings to become unproductive. And I suppose it's something we find in committee meetings is, I'm sure you all know, where you go to the meeting and it's the same 5 or 6 points every night. And I suppose what I would say is, if you find that there's no actions coming out of your meetings, then they're probably unproductive. They're probably not worth having, if there isn't actions coming out of them. So making sure that there are actions, making sure, again, they're assigned to people, and making sure they're followed up and there's actually things been done is a real good part of what the chairperson should do. Shouldn't make people feel foolish or useless. I suppose that speaks for itself. Like, you want to be welcoming, you want to be opening, you want to make everyone's experience in the committee or on the club a positive one. Shouldn't force people to contribute to the discussion. So again, while making sure everyone gets a chance to speak, shouldn't be forcing people if they don't want to. Really hard one sometimes, but they shouldn't lose their temper. When you become the chair of any committee, I suppose you become a target for some people in your club, and like that's probably, it's probably a fact that there's probably always someone in the club that will not a target maybe, but they always take the opportunity to test you. And it's really important you don't lose your temper there, and you stay calm and you stay collected, and you I suppose you stay respectful to all your club members as well. And I said the last one there, it goes back to getting a successor. They shouldn't stay too long. And I suppose it can be the downfall of a lot of officers in the club, and I suppose it's not a slight on them, because a lot of them do it because they really love being involved. But it's always about knowing the time to step aside and let the next person take over that role as well. In terms of members of your committee, then you've got your volunteers, and really what I would say about your volunteers is match your needs on the committee to the skills of members, because there's probably nothing worse than someone who was a great treasurer or a great PRO, and they're a real asset to the club, but they don't want to do that role anymore. So next thing, they're shoehorned into a different role, and they mightn't be good at that, or they mightn't be great at that. So it's about matching the right people to the right roles. And that's, if you take anything from this meeting tonight in terms of your committee, it would be match the right people and match your roles to the skills of your volunteers and of your members. Again, when you're dealing with members of the committee, really important to communicate your expectations to them up front. I think we spoke there at the start about ghost members and about people that maybe put up their hands to do a job at the start of the year, and again are never seen. So I'd be letting people know expectations, that if you're coming on board as an officer, this is what we expect you to do. Here's the role. Here's how many hours a week or a month it's going to take. And if you're not interested, you're not interested. But if you are, here's what we expect you to do. So I think it's really important when you're setting out a committee, and especially when you have maybe you have a new chairperson, new secretary, and you have a new term of people coming in, and you're setting up subcommittees for the first time. Maybe it's really important to let people know exactly what's expected of them from the start. Again, your numbers of people on the committee depends on the amount and the nature of the committee's work. So you've got your number of officers that you do have to elect. at your AGM, and that's your chair, your secretary, treasurer, PRO, all the assistants of those, development officer, coaching officer, your I suppose child protection officer, all that kind of stuff. And then if you have other people that are putting their hand up to get involved, it's really up to yourself as a club to decide, well, how many people do we want? And like, I know most of you are thinking, well, we'll take as many people as we can. But you might find that sometimes, you have a limit of, 30 or 25 or something like that there that works well. It's really about what works well for you. For a lot of clubs, I know, and for a lot of smaller clubs, obviously that won't be an issue at all. But you might find, and especially some of the clubs, in some of the cities where you have upwards of maybe 1,000 members, or you're a one club, and some of the clubs in Dublin have a number of thousands of members. It's about deciding what's the right number for that committee, and how can you represent all the people in your club the best through that. And again, like your members are a valuable tool for testing and developing new leadership, while and getting them involved in the committee, while cultivating a deeper level of commitment to the club. So you might have people who have played for the club, maybe have been involved, have children involved in the club, and I suppose a way of getting them more involved and having a deeper understanding and a deeper level of commitment to the club is by getting them onto the committee. And you also might have identified someone who would maybe be a good officer on your committee later on, and I suppose getting them onto the committee is the first step to them becoming an officer. Again, just in the chat there, guys, if you have anything you'd like to add about members of the committee, what you've seen in your club in terms of what works well in having members of the committee, maybe you have something to say on the numbers involved. Don't be afraid to get involved.
While people are thinking on that now, there was just two that came in while you're talking about kind of the qualities in a chairperson.
Yeah.
I know that Frank just came off just like that. A chairperson should never go off agenda. It's time wasting. And then as well as that, Emily just came in a bit of a kind of slightly off the direct topic of how would you suggest a committee communicates with parents of players in a team, because she's aware that you can't use WhatsApp anymore.
Aye, yeah. So I suppose we don't. I suppose just to address that, we don't condone the use of WhatsApp because it's not GDPR compliant. There hopefully is going to be a new communication tool developed in conjunction with, I suppose, the GAA and Camogie, and hopefully that'll be a really easy and useful way to engage with your members and keep people, I suppose, abreast of what's going on in your club. But because we don't condone WhatsApp, like our official communication methods are letters, emails, texts, like and that's, I suppose, from our point of view, that's how you should be communicating with your club as well. So I hope that answers that. And I see Hazel has just come in. When is that communication tool due? I honestly have no idea, Hazel. It's really, I suppose it's when we don't get updates on that until it is true. I know there's parts of it that are ready in new foreign system. It hopefully is going to be part of that as well. But I suppose that might be a different night. We'll tackle those kinds of things. Yes. Just anything about members of committees in there?
Frank just came in there. There's 160 members. Very hard to get parents of juveniles to help out, etc. They tend to stay away from AGMs. All roles are filled, but not all vice roles, which is just as important. So
yeah. Again, like, I suppose in terms of getting people on your committee, like, it is a really, it's a hard one, because like Frank put it out there, if you're used to, I suppose, going off agendas, meetings that are lasting a long time, maybe it isn't a positive environment in that setting. It can be very off-putting to anyone who wants to be involved. So what I would say there, I know Frank has been involved in a number of the volunteer recruitment webinars, is giving people a small task and giving people a small wee bite of the cherry, I suppose, a bite-sized piece of work to do at the start, and then making sure that they have a good time doing that and they have a good experience doing that. And I suppose just on that, Frank, we do actually have a webinar next Monday night, and it's about managing the expectations of parents and getting them involved in your club. So that might be a useful one to go over that kind of stuff as well. I suppose just in terms of like your committee as a team, and really what you want to do with your committee, like, we have teams on the pitch, your committee should be your team off the pitch, and it's about developing teamwork amongst your committee. And you can see there it's important to realise that the development of effective working relationships among volunteers is a gradual process which requires considerable time and skill. So just like when you take a group of under 8s or under 10s or under 12s out, they're not going to win the All-Ireland in their first training session. So it's important that you develop those skills amongst your committee as well. And there's a number of stages and steps that should be developed to have an effective team that's working well. And we'll go through them now. And I suppose the first one is building the committee and getting the right people involved, as we said there. And you can see there, like, there's a number of steps to that. Engaging your members as a committee, so that you're constantly communicating with your members of your club, that you are being active, that you're developing a positive message from your committee to your club, that people want to come in. Number 2 there, spend time on committee development. I think I said it, sometimes meetings can be very unproductive, and they can be just about, well, this happened last week and we're going to do this next week, and they're very operational at times. So it's important you spend a bit of time, just like you would developing your team and doing, team building with your team on the pitch. It might not be a bad idea to get to know your committee, whether that's some kind of social evening or social event or something, not at the minute, obviously, but if there's some way, even if it was, a Zoom quiz for the, something like that there, that gets people to know each other and gets people, I suppose, to interact with each other a bit more. It can be a good way of developing that bit of teamwork amongst your committee as well. Meeting frequently and regularly for a purpose, and for a purpose is the big one there. Like, I'm sure most committees there would be meeting once a month, and they would be meeting maybe and they discuss, what matches are coming up. Is there anything the coaching team needs? What's our finances like? That's okay. But if you're having, meetings every week, or if you're having meetings every 2 weeks and you're finding that there's not a lot to discuss in them, well, I would consider, moving them to a monthly meeting. Or again, if there's no purpose to your meeting, like I know my own club, they wouldn't have a meeting in July because, one, people are away on holidays usually in a normal year, and 2, there's nothing going on. So that's why they wouldn't have a meeting. They would skip the July meeting. Now that works for them, but it mightn't work for you and your club. So I suppose it's just about if you're having a purpose and you're meeting regularly, then that's good. But if you're meeting a bit too regularly and you're not getting a lot done, maybe rethink that one. Again, determine and agree committee values. So I suppose we all know why we're there. We all know what we're trying to achieve by being part of the club. But what is the values of the committee? What are you actually trying to develop? What's your direction? Like, I would be asking those questions. What's our plan for the next 3 months? What's our developmental plan for the next three years with the club, or the next year? What are our values? Are we about winning everything in sight and only picking the best 15 players? And I'd hope not, but what are your values as a club, and determining that, I suppose, what are your values as a committee as well. And then determining and agreeing committee roles is important for people to know exactly where they stand as well, because you could have somebody who's on the committee and they're just on the committee and they're sort of floating about in this space where they're not an officer and they're not on a specific subcommittee, and they don't really know what they're doing. So anyone that's on your committee, I'd be agreeing exactly what their role is. So are they part of the fundraising committee? Are they going to join into the youth committee? Are they going to have their specific role within that? Because everyone should, and everyone should feel that they're contributing, to your committee. I suppose this one, and it's something we do, I suppose, spend time inside and outside of work socially. So just not just on the work of the committee. I think we're very good at that as an association and as clubs. Making the club a social and having a social aspect of the club as well can be really important to having a good committee working together. I suppose spoil the committee with comfortable surroundings and refreshments. That's I suppose a funny enough one, when you look at it, but like, I'm sure we've all been in instances where I know I've traveled around the country to go to committee meetings, and sometimes you're in a shed, sometimes you're in changing rooms, sometimes the lights aren't on, sometimes the heating's not on. Making sure it's a good surround, making sure people want to come to meetings can be a good way of getting them there. And again, like, if a meeting's going to go on for an hour or 2 hours, have a cup of tea, or have a juice or something like that there, and making people feel appreciated for the time they're given to you. I suppose maybe not that applicable to ourselves, but it is to maybe some committees, is discuss, determine and agree rewards for good performance. Are you going to praise things that go well in the club? Are you going to have you can talk about having, a volunteer in the month or that kind of thing. It might be for you, it might not. But if are you gonna celebrate the successes as a club? That can be a really good way of bringing the committee together as well. Agree on an approach to delegation and empowerment, and we'll talk about delegation in a wee bit later. But you want everyone to be empowered and to be able to step up and to be able to take on, I suppose, further roles within the club. And I suppose somebody once told me that empowerment is the removal of all barriers to success. So I suppose in your role developing the committee, you want to remove all the barriers to people being able to achieve what they want with the club as well. And then lastly, promote the committee and its work within your club. So as I said, we're probably not very good at it as an association and as a people's, saying the things we do well, but shout your successes, shout the things that you're doing well. You mightn't be winning the county championship every year, but there might be something that you do best and you do better than any other club around you. So shout about that. And it might be fundraising, it might be, it might be coach education, it might be anything. But make sure you promote that kind of stuff as well. And people might want to get involved too. Just do we have anything in the chat? Just again, guys, don't be afraid to write in there if you have anything you'd like to add.
There's a good one in from Shirley there, Niall, based on, well, before this slide on the how to get kind of parents involved. Shirley's club, that the juvenile club, have a baking rota, which involves all the parents, and they're more inclined to get involved in other roles then as a result. So they suck them in and then get on the committee.
That's excellent. Yeah, and that's exactly what we're talking about there, is giving someone a bite-sized job and get them onto the baking committee and make us a few buns. And then when you're there, would you like to wash the jerseys, and would you like to get involved on the fundraising committee, and would you like to maybe be a coach, and then you've got them, so that's a good one from Shirley, certainly.
Yeah. Another one is a good promoting committee and praising club on social media channels.
Yeah, another good one from Frank there. Like, yeah, your PRO can be very, very effective in, I suppose, promoting your committee, promoting what you do as a club, and getting new people involved by showcasing what you're good at as a club. Definitely. I suppose just moving on, it's one thing we don't maybe get right as well, as engaging our committee through work. Sometimes I know I've been in committees before, and you haven't really been given anything to do unless you're one of the main people on the committee, and you can get very disinterested very handy with that kind of role. So it's important when you're leading a committee that you're making sure everyone is engaged, everyone is taking part. So again, delegate to people. And what I would say about delegation, we'll deal with it in a wee second, but I suppose if there is something to delegate and something you can delegate, then delegate it. Promote debate and discussion on where we are, where we want to be, and how we should get there. And use brainstorming, use lateral thinking, get people thinking about the club, get people enthusiastic about maybe what their plans are for the club, where they want to see the club. Ensure that all the committee has discussed, contributed, and committed itself to any tasks or objectives. So making sure that's back to making sure people have their say and making sure people are being included. Trying to reach consensus decisions. So making sure that there is a committee decision, that there's not something that the majority of the committee hasn't agreed with, but you're going to plow on with anyway. Making sure that things are reached decisions with a consensus, and then making sure that the combined purpose and the importance of the committee's work is understood by everyone. And I'm sure we've all been in situations where you've sort of went, well, why have they done that, or why has that decision been taken? And maybe it's just because you're not privy to that information, and that's not right either. So everyone should know why decisions are making. They should know how decisions have been came to, and once you let everyone in, they might be agreeable to it, and they might know exactly. I suppose they might get on board when they know the reason why. Number 3, then, engage clarity and definition of key roles and tasks. To develop individual roles, we know there are role descriptions on the LGFA website. Every officer has a role description. It has tasks, responsibilities, and I suppose key skills that officer should have. Use them. Let people know what's expected of them. Ensure role descriptions are up to date and accurate, and ensure that goals set. So if you have a youth officer in the club, or a coaching officer, and they've been told, well, we need to get 20 new coaches this year, that's not realistic, or if you have someone involved in getting people involved in the club on a voluntary level, and you tell them, well, we need 100 new people by June, that's not going to happen. So making sure that when you are giving people tasks, whether that be for fundraising, whether it be in Shirley's case, she said there, baking, that they're not asked to bake 1,000 buns for Saturday morning for under 10 training, making sure people's roles are realistic and they're achievable as well. I suppose number 4, then, developing your committee and your club. Making sure that new officers are inducted. Like, I think it's got to the stage now where our clubs are so complex, and they're that big now, and the tasks that big, that all our officers in the club should be engaged in some kind of training, or they should at least be, be knowing what they're supposed to be doing. And we have a number of induction courses for secretaries, treasurers, PROs, chairpersons. We're working with the GAA and Camogie to develop a whole host of other, I suppose, a suite of other programs there for the likes of an Irish language officer, for your child protection officers, all that kind of stuff. So making sure that your new officers know there are opportunities there to have training, and making sure that they're following them through with training as well. Identify individual and committee training needs. So, like your team, your committee's not going to work if people aren't trained, or they aren't given the skills, or they aren't helped to achieve the skills they need to be able to do the tasks. So if there is some kind of training need within your committee, maybe it's around communication, maybe it's around planning, maybe it's around anything else, figure it out, and then let people give people opportunities to take part in that. Ensure, I suppose this is more work based, but if you had a personal development plan for your committee, so you might have someone who wants to become a chairperson of the club or become the secretary. You could have a personal development plan for them where they take on the assistant secretary's role, or they help out the treasurer for a year, or they come on to the subcommittee that helps out that officer role. And the plan for them could be in 3 years, and suddenly you've got a successor for that role. And then finally, engage others in wider club matters. And that's one, I suppose, we sometimes forget about as well, is that it's not just the team of people that are working hard for the club. There's a whole other host of people, be that normal members, players, coaches, parents, that we need to engage to figure out where we want to be and where we want to go to and where we want to develop as a club as well. Number 5, then, foster a culture of innovation and creativity. So you want people to be able to come up with new ideas. You want people to challenge, I suppose, in a positive way, what's going on at the club. Push it on. You can see that, minimize criticism of failure. If you're gonna criticize something, it can be the failure of whatever happened. It can't be, not on a single person, because no one is going out there and involving themselves in the club to let people down. So remembering that as well, and then reward people that are doing well, and praise people that are doing well. That's not giving them something; it's praising them. It's saying well done, saying thank you to them. So have that culture within your club as well. Can be a tricky one. This one, managing performance. Sometimes things don't go well, and sometimes things might need improved in the club, and you might have someone who's, again, said that they're going to take on a role and they might not. So make sure anyone that does take on a role knows exactly what's expected of them, as we said, first of all, but make sure they know, is there any governance issues, or who are you accountable to when you take on a role in the club? Ensure they know how, what will you be targeted against something? Will you have something to achieve? Back to, again, if it's a fundraising committee, do you have a target to hit, and how is that going to be managed? And I suppose ensure all volunteers are appraised annually. Like that you might think that's a bit pie in the sky to appraise people, and they're given their time freely, but that can mean having a chat with them. What went well for you this year? What didn't go well? Have you any feedback for us? How do you feel you're going in your role? It's important to have those kinds of chats, and it's something we don't do very well. So if you do that in your club, I'd say well done. But sometimes we forget about that kind of stuff as well. I suppose things to remember then, your committee can be effective working force for the club if it has a clear purpose. So if you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing, if your chair is chosen based on leadership and people skills, if your members are chosen to meet the needs of your roles, and they're chosen for the right reasons again. And again, they're chosen strategically to develop new leadership. So if you have people that you've identified that might be able to take on a role in a number of years, that you're getting them involved as well. And I think the last one has been hit on a couple of times in the chat, is that committee meetings are conducted efficiently. And those, I suppose, a few takeaways from, I suppose, what we've discussed over the last while, that you'll be doing well if you're hitting them. Do we have anything in the chat there, or any questions just around that one?
Not at the moment, but a few people might throw them in now.
Okay, yeah, we'll give it 30 seconds again there, guys.
Would you say, Niall, there's a bit of fear within committees to appraise members, a fear that people might walk away if they're kind of challenged, I would say, on their performance?
There probably is, and I would say, I think maybe appraisal is the wrong word there, but I think you need to have standards. Like if you're having a committee, you know, when you want the best for the club, you know, anyone who's getting involved should want that too. And it shouldn't be a negative thing. You know, it shouldn't be a negative thing. And that's the key to it, is not making it a negative thing. And like, if it is that informal chat, how are you getting on this year? Is there anything that we could do better for you? Is there anything that the club could help you with? Is there anything that would help you do, you know, carry out your role more effectively? You know, having those conversations, that can be an appraisal.
I have a question here from Therese. Do you recommend clubs come up with their own purpose, or is there more guidance from LGFA on that?
I suppose, like, you know, your purpose first and foremost is promoting ladies football within your area and through your club. But I would say if your club have maybe a specific purpose, so you might have a new club and you might decide, well, our purpose is to establish ourselves in the local area, then that is your purpose. You know, so it can be a good thing that you have a specific purpose, and it might be that this is our purpose for, you know, the length of this committee, and this is what we're here to achieve. You can sometimes see that, I suppose, and you know, it's probably more obvious in maybe the GA, where, you know, you might have a committee comes on board and their purpose for the term of their committee is to build a new stand, or so, you know, something like that there, where they have a specific goal in mind or something they want to achieve for the time of their committee. But it can be, especially when a new top table, if you want, comes on board, like a chairperson, secretary, treasurer, maybe there's a change over there. That can be the time to think of, well, what is our purpose here? What's our drive here?
There's just one there from Shirley, said that sometimes committees can be old school and it's frowned upon to say something.
Yeah, definitely. But again, like what I would say, it's the same as when we're coaching. It's the same as when we're on the pitch. You know, if you're not challenging something, and if you're not pushing yourself on, you're not going to get anywhere. So really, you know, you should be thinking about your committee the same way, you know. And that's it, isn't it, Claire?
Yeah, there's just one last one there. Ensure good relations with men's clubs and other codes, hurling, etc.
Yeah, and again, if you're in a one club situation, make sure that you have your say on other committees as well, and you're working well with other committees within the club. Definitely good point there. And I suppose not just your in our own Gaelic games. You know, if there's other clubs in the locality as well, that you're working effectively with them, because really you're here to promote the same thing as sport and exercise and well-being. So it's important to have a good relationship with other clubs in your area as well. I suppose just the other thing we're going to look at tonight, and it's not going to take maybe that as long as the first part there, but it's just about delegation, and it's something we sometimes forget about. And I suppose, like, delegation, to get a bit technical here, delegation of authority is a process which the authority and powers are divided amongst subordinates. And what that means is that you're asking somebody else to do something for you. When the work of a leader gets beyond their capacity, there should be some kind of way of sharing work. And like, we have a great one, and a lot of clubs don't utilize it, and that's subcommittees, you know, and assistants and vices. And it's a great way of delegating. This is how delegation of authority becomes an important tool in any organization. Through delegation, a leader is multiplying themselves by dividing or multiplying their work with subordinates. And again, like, I think Shirley hit the nail on the head there when she said sometimes people can be old school and they don't want to share anything, and they don't want to make it look like maybe they're doing less work than they are. But when you're delegating and when you're sharing out the workload, you're multiplying what you're fit to do, and that's really, I suppose, the key to what we're going to discuss here. So, like, this is a really simple one. Why it's good and why it's important to do it. Two's better than one. You know, it's really as simple as that. If you have two people working on towards the same goal, you're gonna get a lot more done. Whereas if you have one person, they're bogged down by doing several different tasks, they mightn't get as much work done. You know, to develop your own skills. So delegation can be one of the hardest things for a leader or for someone who's in a, I suppose, an officer role in a club to do, because you're giving away a part of your role, or you don't want to look like maybe you're giving away too much, and you don't want to look like, it can be very hard to delegate to people and ask people to do things for you. But by delegating and by getting people to do certain roles for you, it can help you develop that skill as well. It increases communication because you're including more people in what you're doing, and it creates collective successes. So rather than it just been Claire in your club, just been Claire did this and Claire did that and Claire did that. It can be the committee did this and the subcommittee did this, and it brings people in and gives them successes as well. Builds an efficient committee, because as we talked about, you don't want people doing no job. You don't want people just on the committee floating about doing nothing. So including them people there as well. It keeps good people in your committee. So as we talked about there, you might have the person who was a great PRO or was a great secretary, but maybe wouldn't be good in one of the other officer roles. We'll keep them on the committee, but delegate a certain part of that role to them possibly. And the last one there, saves time. Like really, simple as that as well. If you're running about, doing 100 different things, you can delegate half of them and suddenly you've saved a lot of time. I suppose if you could give us a wee example in the chat in your current role of how you delegate, and maybe focus on the second one there. Is there anything that you could delegate but you don't at the minute in your club? So again, don't be afraid to write in the chat, guys, and give us your input there. Is there anything in your current role you do well in terms of delegating? So what do you delegate in your current role? And is there anything you could but you're still holding on to for some reason?
While people are typing in there on the delegation thing now, that also reinforces the strength of the qualities of the people in your committee. You're not going to delegate if you don't think the person can do it. So that's why it's so important that people are in a role that they're going to do well in.
Yeah, definitely, yeah, and like it can reinforce people's interest in a role. I think, like as we said as well, like if someone has an interest in becoming the next chairperson of your club, well, delegate part of the role to them. Let them get a taste of what it's like. Definitely. I see there Katrina has come in with delegated the pitch booking. Like there's a pretty simple one, really useful one as well. I'm sure that was taking up quite a bit of your time because of the amount of people that are looking use of pitches. And suddenly you can focus on, I suppose, what your role is really about. Because Katrina, if you don't mind, I don't know what your role is, but I'm assuming you're a secretary or the chairperson. And like, if you're spending a lot of your time, I see that you have 4 codes and 28 teams. I'd say you're spending the majority of your time before you delegated booking pitches, which you don't want to be at. You want to be able to focus on your own role. There, you're secretary in one club. There you are, exactly. And maybe if anyone else wants to write into the chat there, just let us know. Is there anything you could delegate? Have a think about what you do in your club at the minute. Is there anything you could delegate but you don't? And maybe Claire, you'll keep an eye on that, and I'll just move forward with the slides here.
Yeah, work away.
I suppose barriers to delegation, and it's. I suppose we're going to look at the different kinds of barriers here, but through delegation enhances efficiency of an organisation. It's not free from obstacles. There's various barriers around it, and there can be 3 headings, and we're going to get a bit. Don't mind the technical language here again, but there's barriers relating to superiors, which are your leaders in the club, your officers, or your delegator, that is the person who's given the task, and barriers to subordinates. And I don't like using the word subordinates, but the person you're delegating to, and then barriers relating to the organization or the structure of your club. So we're going to look at them now. Barriers to yourselves, superiors, people that are delegating. You want to do things personally, and you might have a specific way. If we take Katrina's example of doing the pitch bookings, and maybe you wanted to do it that specific way, and maybe if you delegated it, it wouldn't be done the way you wanted it to be done. But you might find by delegating, it might be done a different way, but it might be done just as well. There can be an insecurity because you don't want to let people in and what your role is. And I know when you take on a role, you do have pride in it, and you want to do it as best you can. Sometimes you can feel a wee bit insecurity about having to give up certain parts of it to other people. There can be a bit of a retention of power. People, it's a fact of life. People like power and they like holding on to power. So, retaining, I suppose, that bit, where I'm doing this role, it's my role, and not letting people in to be able to delegate can be a wee barrier as well. Lack of confidence in people you're delegating to. Is this person up to the task? Can I let them do it? What happens if they let me down? You need to trust people as well. Unwillingness to set standards. So, like, there might be a certain way something's done in the club and no one else knows how to do it, and that might be the way you like it, but it can be more beneficial to the club if there's a standardized way of doing a task and everyone knows how to do it, and that way it can be delegated to anyone. And then you might have other personal factors about why you don't want to let someone do a job, but we'll not get into them tonight. In terms of barriers relating to people you're delegating to, there can be a lack of confidence if somebody's doing something for the first time, and as well as that, a fear of making mistakes. There can be a lack of incentives, and you can see on this there's a wee icon of money there, but unfortunately that's not the incentive here. But it can be, if they do it wrong, they can get told off. They could get, they could get shed out of it, and that's not what they want. So it's maybe there's not that culture of people stepping forward in the clubs. There's not the incentive to actually put your neck out there and take on a role. It could be about access to resources. They mightn't have the time, they mightn't have the ability, the skills to do the role, and it can be sometimes out of convenience. With people just say, well, I'm happy enough. I'm happy enough doing my own wee bit here, and I don't really want to take on part of your role. And then it can be barriers to the organisation, and I suppose size of the organisation is one. So size of your club, whether you're 50 people or 5,000 people, there are difficulties to that. So if you're that small that you have everyone who possibly could be doing something, then it's very hard to find somebody to delegate to. If you're in a club that's a massive membership, again, it can be about spreading yourself too thin and not knowing who to delegate to. And maybe not having the ability to delegate as much as you can. There might be no presence of delegation within the club, and I suppose that's up to you to change that then. And then I suppose the other thing is how centralised or decentralised you are, and by that I mean, do you have just a committee and an executive, or do you have subcommittees? So once you have a subcommittee structure, it can be far easier to delegate because you already have all these other people doing all these other roles for you. That's in terms of our barriers. Do you have anything else in the chat first there, Claire?
Yeah, there's a couple more that came in there. So we had it's 2 seconds now. Catherine came in and said good communication between the club registrar and team managers to keep them updated on members who have registered. Gillian came in going, getting involved in all fundraising activities instead of asking more people to get involved. And that's one thing, you can take on too many roles. And then also Frank came in now, I don't know if I read this right, but it's he could delegate more as PRO, but he likes doing it and has tried to sell it to younger members, but there's been no uptake. He's secretary too, I think, and it delegates IT matters to the vice secretary, who is good, and trying to sell it as it doesn't want to do it too long. Secretary and PRO complement each other, which makes it easier but not ideal.
Yeah, so. And I can relate to both of them there, because it can be very hard to step back and say, look, somebody else take this on, and like I can say in Frank's case especially, like you don't want to step away from the PRO role because you don't want it not to be done at all. And like really, I probably found myself in that position a number of years ago where I was managing, coaching a couple of teams in the club. I was vice chair. I was operating the club website. I was doing all this other kind of stuff. You're involved in fundraisers. And it's because you wanted to be involved. And I understand that. Like you want to be involved in all the good things that are about your club. But really, what I found out I was doing, I was stopping other people from getting involved. Because I was doing it for them, and I was doing it. I was not giving anything a chance to fail. So I wasn't going to let the website not be done, or I wasn't going to let a team not have a coach. But sometimes, and I suppose in Frank's case especially, like it might be a case that you're only one person, so one of them roles doesn't get done, and it could be that you let the vice secretary take on the secretary role and you do the PRO, or vice versa. And I think you've summed it up there well, Frank, that the more you do, the more there's left to you to do. And that can be a real barrier to delegation as well. That once people know you'll do a job, it can be very hard for them to take that job off you then. So really it's about being, I suppose, and putting your foot down yourself and saying, well, look, I can't do all this myself, so I'm gonna step away from this and let it, and let it not let it fail, but let someone else step up and don't have the safety net of you that you'll do it anyway. I suppose just how to overcome the different barriers we talked about there. Like as I was just saying there, you accept the need for it. Accept that you're not gonna be the safety net that's gonna do everything and make sure no job doesn't get done. Develop a confidence in people that are going to take on the roles. Communicate. So make sure people might know that there's a number of jobs needing done, or they might know how much needs done. Motivate people. So Frank said it there. Sell the job to them. Sell the task to them. It might be a small wee job, but sell it to them. Have kind of system and control in place that people know exactly how something should be done. So it's not that they're told, away you go and you know, do the club notes, and they've never done it before, and they don't know how, and they don't know where to go to the printers, and they don't know, you know, have it that if there's a job to be done, there's a specific way of doing it, and it's maybe written down somewhere, or you know, there's a way of doing it that they can easily follow, and then give them freedom to do it. And that can be one, you know, when people get a role delegated to them, sometimes they can feel that you're watching over their shoulder, and like that's not a good thing either. You know, step back and let them have the confidence that they're going to do it, and you know, keep an eye on them, maybe checking with them every so often, but don't be watching over them. You know, and I suppose some ways of overcoming barriers as well is, you know, have a clarity of what has to be done, match the right people to the right role. So if there's a job needs done, make sure the right person's doing it. Have open communications, and monitor any have the confidence in people and let them have the freedom to be able to do it. But if they go majorly offline or offside from you, you know, step in then and say, well, actually, this is what I actually wanted you to do. I suppose in terms then the last bit in delegation, just the rewards of it, you know, it keeps you from putting too many irons in the fire. And you can see like Frank there has come in with a great one about having so many irons in the fire. I know it myself as well. It builds trust, open communication, and engagement among your committee members. It stimulates creativity and develops the skills in your committee. And it creates a positive culture, because when everyone's shipping in and everyone's helping out, they can feel a real part of it, and it can drive your committee on, you know. I suppose that's us in terms of delegation and managing your committee. We may take a couple of minutes just if you have any questions. And if not, you know, thanks for listening tonight. And Claire, would you have anything to add just before we finish?
No, just like I think everything's captured in the presentation, like in that last slide. It's just, you know, you're going to save yourself a lot of time by getting the right people in and delegating and get everybody working, you know.
Yeah, so thanks very much for listening tonight, guys, and thank you, you know.